I go to Princeton University, majoring in psychology.
I go to Harvard and I'm majoring in economics.
I'm going to Duke and I'm majoring in psychology and global health.
I'm going to Johns Hopkins and I'm majoring in chemistry.
Our advantage, great teachers and programs at Orange County Public Schools. See what's possible for you.
There are magnet programs, advanced placement and honors classes, and guidance counselors who help us choose the right courses.
You can even earn college credit while in high school.
OCPS has programs for every type of learner.
Orange County Public Schools, leading students to success.
All right, everybody could grab a seat. We're going to go ahead and get started in this meeting of the Orange County School Board. I want to thank everybody for coming this evening and joining us. I do apologize for starting late. That's become an all too frequent apology, but we have, before this meeting starts, another meeting, a pre-agenda meeting, and of late we've had a number of speakers at the pre-agenda meeting, and we've been running late on those meetings for the last month or two, but I'm sorry that we're not starting right on time. This is a special night this evening. We are recognizing Colonial High School, Cypress Creek High School, and West Orange High Schools, as well as Gotham Middle School, for their Red Ribbon Certified School status. All right. And I'm going to ask their principals to stand first, and they're all well known to us. Dr. John Prince from Colonial High. Dr. Prince. Heather Hilton from Cypress Creek. There she is. Where is Heather? Doug Szynski from West Orange High. Doug. And Patrice Knowles, principal at Gotham Middle School. Where's Patrice? There she is. And can I have all of your staff members stand collectively and let us recognize you as well from all your schools? Thank you. And one of those staff members, of course, is somebody very well known to us and someone we're very fond of, our very own Teacher of the Year, Kristen Iannuzzi from West Orange High School. And Kristen is going to lead us in the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand and bow your heads for a moment of silence. And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
I do. Well, thank you, Ms. Iannuzzi, for that. Let's now welcome to the podium Ms. Christine Stillwell, Orlando Regional Director of Informed Families, the Florida Family Partnership, along with Sharon Warner, Informed Families Prevention Consultant. Ladies, thank you so much for being here tonight and for recognizing 4 outstanding school teams. We look forward to hearing more from you about their Red Ribbon certification status. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, school board members. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Colonial High School, Cypress Creek High School, West Orange High Schools earned the designation of Red Ribbon Certified Schools in May of 2014. Gotham Middle School earned a recertification of Red Ribbon status during the same month. This is a distinguished achievement shared with 21 other schools in Orange County and 70 other schools nationwide. The Center for Prevention Research at Florida State University assessed school performance in 4 areas: school environment, best practices in education, parent engagement, and substance abuse prevention activities. The Red Ribbon certification status celebrates success in these areas. A Red Ribbon certified school is a school that is committed to implementing a strong underage drinking and drug prevention curriculum and engages faculty, administration, students, parents, and members of the community in the prevention process. Schools must demonstrate a healthy school environment where the school leadership and administration engage in open and frequent communication and continue to promote drug and underage drinking prevention in the school. Red Ribbon certified schools must also use prevention-related curriculum guided by best practices. work with parents as partners, and engage in year-round Red Ribbon activities. The Red Ribbon Certified School Program was originally developed by Informed Families, the Florida Family Partnership, the Florida Center for Prevention Research at Florida State University, and funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Please congratulate the district's newest Red Ribbon certified schools and the recertified school, Colonial High School, Cypress Creek High School, West Orange High School, and Gotha Middle School. Thank you to all 4 schools and their Red Ribbon teams. Sharon Warner and I will present you with a momentum to recognize your hard work and achievement. If we could have Dr. Prince and his team from Colonial step forward, please. At this time, we want to give special recognition to Rosa Cortez Bowden from Colonial High School for her lead in the application process. Next, Principal Heather Hilton from Cypress Creek High School and Sonia Ledger, SAFE Coordinator. Cypress Creek stood out to us for having the most enthusiastic student committee. This year, their football players will wear red ribbons at this week's football game. Principal Doug Szynski and the West Orange High School team. We were impressed by Mr. Szynski's uploading pictures of his own personal Family Day activity to his school's Facebook page. And our Red Ribbon recertified school, Gotha Middle School, led by Principal Patricia Knowles. Of course, Gotha has remained dedicated to prevention by completing the Red Ribbon Certified Schools application several times. Last year, they devoted 2 pages to their school yearbook to Red Ribbon activities. Thank you to all these schools.
So I'll give them one more round of applause. And on behalf of the board, I know we'd all like to shake your hand, and we have a small certificate as well for each of your teams. We'd like to shake all of y'all's hands if you could just sort of filter along the board here. And Ms. Warner, Ms. Stillwell, thank you so much. All right, we do have a strategic plan up. Yes, you can, of course. Ms. Flynn.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I was talking to Ms. Stillwell, and she said that we have 21 schools, but we really have one of the best programs, right, in Florida, because of our comprehensive higher success rate. Highest.
The highest success rate in certifying Red Ribbon schools nationwide. All right. Thank you.
So I think that's really great. And, you know, for these schools to go above and beyond and go through the certification process and the application process, I just think, you know, it's wonderful. That's a lot of work. Thank you.
I agree, and they've already left the room, but it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for something that's very, very important. So thank you for what you're doing on behalf of our students and raising the bar and the level of awareness of issues that we need to all be more aware of in our schools today. It's a very meaningful distinction to be a Red Ribbon school. Thank you, Ms. Stillwell. And I won't hold you being a Seminole against you. I couldn't resist that one. Go Seminoles. All right. We are joined today by, I always love it when we have scouts come sit in one of our meetings working on their merit badges. And these two particular scouts are very near and dear to my heart because they're in my son's troop, Troop 24. We're joined today by Ethan Garris and Brogan Tagman and their father, Keith Tagman, who are working on, I believe, are you all working on your communications merit badge or one of your citizenships? Communications merit badge. So boys, stand up and let us recognize you. Thank you for coming today. All right. I have a strategic plan update this evening. Ms. Cadle.
Well, I'm not sure when he's going to leave, but one of our outstanding principals who was recognized as the Elementary School Principal of the Year by the Media Association today for everything he has done and the points he pulled up his school in the FCAT testing this spring, Mr. Seth Dobb. And congratulations, Seth, for all of the innovative things you're doing to encourage children to read at Castle Creek.
Stand up, Seth. Let us recognize you, Mr. Dobb. All right. Thank you. All right, we do have a strategic plan update tonight, so let me turn it over to Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Since this is Bullying Prevention Month, we thought it would be a pretty good time to share with you our guidance and counseling services update. And so Mr. Fritz is actually at the College Board, Dr. Fritz is actually at the College Board meetings, so we will have before you Drs. Jara and Cartwright.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, and good afternoon, board members. As Dr. Jenkins mentioned, we're going to go over a guidance and mental health update this afternoon. And as we look at it and we start our first presentation here, wanted to show you as one of our school board priorities was to lower the secondary and the high school ratio, and through our allocation formula we looked at and added 17 counselors into our 19 high schools, and which brought down the ratio from 463 to 1 and to 410 to 1 on for the high school ratio. Our middle school counselors, following what we did last year for our high schools, and we added last year some days for high school counselors. We did and followed the same model. We didn't add additional dollars. What we did is we looked at the number of days that were used, and we added 8 days per counselor for our middle schools. Some of our middle schools with the numbers, so 8 days for our school counselors in our middle schools. And our counselors looked at and worked on, what they did is they analyzed data, student outcomes from the previous year, incoming sixth graders. And when they looked at level 4 and 5 in reading scores, what our counselors and what they worked on is looked at their scores and communicated with their parents and scheduled the students in advance English, language arts, and social studies courses. And also when they looked at the incoming sixth graders for math, level 4 and level 5, and followed the same process and really try to increase the rigor for the students and having that opportunity. So what we also did is put them and place them in advanced math and science courses as well. So that was some of the work that looking at our middle school this past summer. And as I noted earlier, our high school counselors with 25 days that we gave them, again, following the same process, they were available all summer long. And our high school counselors really worked on our schedule and making sure that parents had their schedules during the summer for their students. One of the things that in our partnership with Valencia that we had actually initiated last year, through the partnership with Valencia College, we hired 5 district college counselors that they came in and they started working this summer. And one of the immediate tasks was to really look at our graduating seniors as they graduated, was to really making sure that as we know, when they graduate high school and they say, well, we're going to Valencia, we're going to college, what the 5 counselors, one in each learning community house here at the ELC, what they did is they worked with our graduating seniors to make sure that they matriculate, and helping parents with financial aid, and also the registration process. So that's one of the things that we spent some time in working this past summer. One of the exciting things also as well was that we looked at our AP potential. We had, as you know, we administer the PSAT for 9th and 10th grade students. So we work with these with the 5 counselors here and staff, and also with our schools, and identified over 250 students that had AP potential, and work with the schools and schedule the students into advanced placement courses as well. So we utilize some of the work using the counselors, and I'm going to take a point here to brag a little bit about the outcomes, and I know you've seen it, but it's really worth mentioning and noting, because as we've shared in the past through our communication, is that overall Orange County schools increase test takers by 16%. Oops, I'm sorry, the screen went blue, but and also increase our performance. So we had more students taking AP courses, and at the same time increasing our performance. Also to note, our Black students increased 30%. There was an increase of participation of 30% and 35% in performance. So again, we're increasing access, and at the same time, the students are getting the 3, 4s, and 5s. And for our Hispanic students as well, 16% test takers, and also an 18% increase in performance. So our school principals and our teachers are doing a great job in really increasing access for our students. And one of the things that when we look at statewide and across the country, to increase the access and again increasing the performance is something that we should all be very proud of. And as we look at it, we are outpacing the state and the nation, as we mentioned. So our counselors, our district college transition counselors, also work with our students to make sure our graduating seniors have a plan. As we mentioned, it's also when our kids are leaving in their senior year that they have a plan for post-secondary, and that is career technical education, also college, 2-year, 4-year, where they're going to go to the workforce and or the military. So we are making sure that the kids have a plan as they are leaving our schools. So as we look at, as the superintendent mentioned, this is Bullying Awareness Month and Prevention, and wanted just to update the board in some of the activities that are going on throughout our schools. Our schools are hosting, and they're doing contests, anti-bullying contests. They're making banners, posters, and having students take pledges to end bullying in our schools. We also are continuing with our Act for Change website as well, and the website has plenty of resources for our schools and training opportunities and DVDs available for our schools to use. And one of the things that we kicked off this year as well is looking at our 14-15. As we kicked off this year, we added a Child Safety Matters curriculum endorsed by the Florida Department of Education, but funded by the Monique Burr Foundation. And it's really a comprehensive program. It's a comprehensive program that really is age appropriate for students, elementary school students, really, so students and adults in schools really have some opportunity to learn about what child abuse and bullying, cyberbullying, and all the different things. And I can tell you that the majority of our schools have been trained. We're now going through a process of makeup training as well for our schools. Our middle schools, we're going to continue with our MAGIC curriculum in partnership with our Sheriff's Department. Our SROs are continuing with our professional development, and also we are continuing with our partnership with the Holocaust Center as well, and the anti-bullying program. And as you also know that we are adding 8 schools and continuing with a partnership there as well with the city of Orlando. Point to really be proud of our schools and the professional development that we have been providing our teachers and our staff as well. Nope. No, I can't see the slide, but that's okay. No, that's okay. I can see it here. It's no, I have it. I can see the slide here. This last one. There we go. It was when probably when I was banging on the podium. I was so excited about the AP scores. But really, this is also, as you probably see it in your screen with a graph where you look at the trend data on bullying and our incidents. We have a 37% decrease in our elementary schools and a 60% decrease in our secondary schools. So again, awareness, the training, and providing the support for our families as well. So now I'll turn it over to Dr. Cartwright.
Good evening. I'm going to be talking to you this evening regarding our mental health counselors and our suicide prevention update. For the role of our mental health counselor is to support our students in OCPS whose mental health issues are interfering with their academics and overall well-being. They do this a lot of times to support the students through individual counseling as well as through group counseling that's available, such as a brief or a psychoeducational in nature. This could be anger management, emotional regulation, impulse control, self-esteem, as well as trauma via cognitive behavior therapies. In addition, they assist in crisis counseling for school-wide crisis situations. This would be such things as grief counseling or triage for more intensive situations. And then they also provide staff trainings on mental health disorders. And this is one area which is being expanded this year. And with that training is for district-wide trainings for all staff, which can include mental health disorders in children and adolescents, like the behaviors and symptoms and the type of interventions that can be applied even in the classroom, trauma as well as self-regulation, in the silence. That's really kind of looking at that mental health component and really identifying who are those students who may be suffering from mental health and intervening appropriately, as well as your typical or troubled type of behaviors that we may see. That's through a grant that we received through the American Psychiatric Foundation. Our expectations are that there are 2 district mental health counselors assigned to each learning community. And in addition to providing professional development in the mental health disorders, as well as assisting with high-need situations at all schools, our counselors also support students who also receive ESE services as well. In addition to our mental health counselors, we also have a suicide prevention specialist. This specialist works with any student or family in crisis concerning suicide and also provides immediate intervention, threat assessments, and resources for students and families. Dr. Jenkins.
As I mentioned earlier, members of the board, since this is Bullying Prevention Week, we especially wanted to note the efforts that we have here in that regard. I think especially noteworthy is the mayor's additional drive and contribution for those schools that fall within the city of Orlando's limits. But I want the board to be assured that we have bullying prevention efforts in all of our schools. I think that's critical for the general public to realize as well. And then as a secondary note, I wanted to end with the bullying, but Dr. Jara certainly covered some initiatives that are in place thanks to this board's direction and your generosity during the budgeting time period, where we added counselors to our high schools, added days for summer for both high school and middle school counselors, and added actual behavior counselors to each of our learning communities to help deal with those issues as they arise in our various schools. schools. So I want to make sure that the general public understands those were initiatives that the school board asked us to advance on behalf of our children to make sure they were getting more individual care around both their college and career planning and also around mental health issues. And so we are happy to report those, all of those provisions are in place. Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for that report. Dr. Jara, that was a very good display of flying by the seat of your pants without PowerPoint. There's nothing worse than losing your PowerPoint in the middle of a presentation. We could all follow it up here. I'm sorry the audience could not. Ms. Cadle, is that an old one or is that? Okay.
You know, one of the things, there has been so much talk about bullying nationwide. And I find it interesting, years and years ago, we had Safe Schools money. And it just seems like more and more, there are more things falling on the plate. And that money has dried up. And that was a time when all of the agencies could get together and share best practices. And, you know, it had been in our schools forever. And it just seems like the more the media would report instances of bullying or perhaps, you know, we dealt with this not too long ago about children going to parties and mixing prescription pills in a bowl and taking a handful of them. And those are the things that the SAFE coordinators and, you know, the SAFE school teams and everything dealt with. And I know that when we have a tragedy on one of our campuses, we have excellent professionals that go in there and help not only the students and the families, but also our teachers and our support people who are there who have lost a part of their community. And it just seems like at some point, hopefully that funding will come back. I know that through the PSP process, we're talking about challenge days, and I know some of us have participated in challenge days here on this board, and that also does a lot to help children not feel isolated and to, you know, we hear statistics, but when you actually see the statistics crossing the line, it makes it real. And so I hope we will continue to focus on making our school climates as healthy as they can be. And I've had a couple of calls this year, and, you know, we have sat here at the board table before, and this is a plea to all of the parents that are out there. If your child doesn't feel safe, you have got to call the school principal or the guidance counselor and let them know, because we have professionals that can help. What happens a lot of times is nobody speaks out. There's also a phone number you can call to speak out, and it's crucial. And if your child does not feel safe at our schools, please tell your child to go to an adult. They are there to help, and they will not judge you, and they will help you get through the situation. So in this time where we're talking about bullying, it's a plea. Please let your children know to go to an adult and let them know what's going on.
Well said, Ms. Cadle. Ms. Gould.
I had a couple of questions. One is on the additional summer days. Do most other districts bring their counselors in on those additional summer days, or is that something unique to us?
When we looked at the data, it varies. There are some districts that they do it, but it's school-based. I know in some of the districts that we looked at, it's a school-based decision, but not as strategic as what we were able to do this past couple of years.
And I heard you talk cursory about the impact of that with some of the planning and allowing the counselors to be able to pick up a little bit more. But what do you feel the greatest gains of? I know at Olympia, the scheduling seemed to go much more flawlessly this year for my son and his peers. But what do you think the greatest gains for the kids those first few weeks of school in particular?
I think you're exactly right. having the schedules and the opportunity to look at. And also, what we did with our middle school and have the opportunity to analyze the data after the data comes in from the state, so then you can make the appropriate placement and the appropriate coursework.
Okay. And then I didn't hear you talk a lot about you touched on it, but not a lot about more career pathing content. How are we doing in the professional development side to really get the counselors up to speed on all the certification programs that could be available to our students? Because I know they're very versed on college and AP, which is fantastic, but they're in the past have not been as versed on what is right at their fingertips for some of these kids.
Under Dr. Armbruster's leadership, we also added 19, one for each high school, a career counselor. So they're really involved in the professional development and providing the opportunities and having the conversations with the students. So now every high school has one career specialist at each school.
Okay, that's great. And hopefully we'll do a lot more kind of disposition testing early on so that we can see where their interests are. And this kind of switches to the mental health component a little bit, but on the ESE and on the mental health, I think we do a phenomenal job, and I've gotten to see the private sector partnerships with us and what a great job we do. Where I've run into some challenges this year is the communities of the schools where some of our programs are not as well educated when we have classes that differ within the body of that school. Is that something that we could do a little bit more of, is that community education, not only within the school, but just, I think district-wide, it's very important when you talk about bullying and differences between people to really understand a child with mild autism may be different, and the other child may not even understand why they're different. And so some of that education to the severe side of, why does that person have somebody with them all of the time? Are there plans for a little broader education components in that area?
We have actually expanded out our family forums in each of our learning communities this year. Last year, we only had it in the West Learning Community. We now have that in each of our learning communities. In fact, we just had our first forum meeting a couple weeks ago across the entire district, where families had an opportunity to come in, learn about some of the needs of some of the children. We also are putting in, whenever we have a unit that opens up, typically we have an opportunity to invite the parents of that community to come in and learn a little bit about the unit, that particular special needs unit, so that the public for that community can have a better understanding of what are some of those unique characteristics that you're talking about. Great. One of the things we can look into, though, is, because you're absolutely right, we do have some schools that have had units for an extended period of time, and it might be wise of us to go ahead and take a look back at those schools and just make sure that the communication is very clear, because we do have a fluctuation of parents that come in. The community may not change, but the parents do. Right. And making sure that we're doing a better job of outreaching to them.
One of the things is maybe once a year remind those PTAs at those schools in particular about the different populations that are served, because that's where I've gotten some feedback, is the PTA switches over to and they're not as familiar.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we just had was with our Student Disability Awareness Week, as well as putting out the information to our schools and making sure that we're having a concerted effort in trying to help people understand the unique needs of our students.
Mr. Roach.
I couldn't help but notice the ratio has gone down, and that is really, really good, a good thing. 50 students doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, and it's going in the right direction. The national suggested average is 1 to 250, so we have some ways to go there with the counseling programs. But that is really that's great news. When my last year as a counselor, I had over 500 people Excuse me, is that right? Yeah. What was the numbers up there? Down to 450 or something? Yeah, I had over 500, 515, I think. I just had to throw my hands up one day, so I don't know how to get to them. But the other thing, too, and I want to thank Mr. Sublette for his comments last year about noticing that the schedules were out of whack and not ready, and suggested. And it's nice to see a board member's concern mentioned, and then the next year to see the problem resolved. And I think it's great, too, because Mr. Sublette, you know, I'm a counselor. I like to speak up for him. It's nice to see other board members pitch in for that, because that means a lot to a counselor, because in my old days, we used to do that for free. We would go in and just work because we knew that it would be a nightmare if we didn't. The other thing I wanted to mention was just a caution, and if there's a way to look for this. But we always do a lot of bragging and boasting, and I do too, about the low administration costs that we have in the district. Matter of fact, I think we had the lowest at one point here this year, and that's a good thing, I think. But there's an unintended consequence if we're not careful. I like to, if there's a way to look for this, is that sometimes I've noticed that those administrative duties get cut so deeply that they're simply passed. They don't disappear. They're simply passed on down to the guidance department. And so I think that was brought clearly. I may have said this to you before, but it's worth saying again. I was visiting a school once, and I had a very angry counselor bring me in. She just said, "Would you mind sitting down?" She did. She plopped out a stack of requests to see her. She says, "I can't get to these. These are kids that want to see me." And I said, "Why?" And then she mentioned, she said, "I'm doing so many administrative duties." Of course, the principal's with me there at the same time, so she didn't mind saying it, just being very honest. I thought that was a good thing to say, because it's about student services. If you're going to be a counselor, you got to be you're the free safety of the school. You're the one that gets to roam the field, to go to the problem areas. So that was that one. I want to ask Vicki a question too about: is there a distinction being made between counselors and mental health counselors? Our counselors have counseling degrees and master's degrees in counseling. Is there another role somebody's playing? How does that work?
There is a difference with our guidance counselors at schools versus what the counselors I was referring to are certified mental health counselors. So there is a difference between the two roles, and there definitely is a difference as far as their experience is concerned, and the role that they take here in Orange County Public Schools. Because with our certified behavior counselors, they a lot of times when our guidance counselors have worked with the student and they recognize that they still need some more intensive services or additional services, though there's a process that we have in place, and then they reach out to our certified mental health counselors who come in and intervene and work with us.
Okay, so that's a district request that they come into the schools. We don't have one housed at every school, a mental health specialist.
Not a certified behavior counselor, no, sir.
Okay. And the last comment was simply good for the bully prevention stuff. It's ongoing. You can't have an assembly and get it done. You can't do just posters and get it done. It has to be a culture in a school, and kids who are the bystanders have to be protected, or it just won't work. So keep up the good work with that.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Ms. Moore.
No, I agree. It's been exciting to see when Dr. Jenkins gets into budget cycle, she really does come in and talk to us to hear what we're seeing from the community as to needs. And I certainly had seen that for years. With that first week of school was a little precarious at school because schedules had not been settled and their issues. So I know it's made a big difference in terms of the children coming to school the first day and being ready to learn because they weren't dealing with scheduling and counseling issues. So that's been very exciting. I wanted to ask a question. I think we might have talked about this a little bit at a work session, but how much of the counselor's time and other classroom teachers end up in proctoring exams, and maybe Dr. Jenkins could just update us on that concern. No, she's not ready. But at some point I know that's been our concern with this whole testing conversation. So perhaps down the road we can address that issue, because I know the counselors are certainly one who end up on the front lines of having to assist with all of the exams and all the assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Ms. Gordon.
Okay, thank you so very much. I did want to just comment on the the district mental health counselors assigned to each learning community. The board asked for that, and we want to really commend the staff, Dr. Jar and your staff, and Dr. Cartwright, especially our superintendent. When we asked for the mental health counselors, we were looking more at our conference that is going to come up in our work sessions on the restorative justice. This puts us in place for us to be able to go back and re-examine our code of student conduct. And having those certified mental health counselors is going to put us far above the game. And I really want to encourage and commend the superintendent and staff for being able to get them into every learning community. When we asked for them, Mr. Chair and board members, we didn't know that we would get them spread out that wide, because you ask for a little bit and then you get a few. But I think that we are well on our way with the suicide prevention specialists. I just think that this is awesome. And I know that when we get an opportunity to go back in and re-examine and work on the code of student conduct and the revision of that, and in line with our restorative justice, we are way ahead of the game on a national level. And I think that this is where it is, and I think you all have put in a lot of work on the national level trying to bring Orange County and the students into place. So I definitely thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Gordon. We do have two speakers. We don't usually get speakers on strategic plan updates, but we have two tonight. But before we go into it, I would be remiss. I do want to say thank you to the voters of Orange County, because we have a millage referenda that's up again for renewal here in 7 days from today. And one of the reasons that we were able to lower the ratio of those counselors, and I think our entire board recognizes, and Mr. Roach, you've been a leader on this for years, we recognize that so much of what we aspire to do as far as our students getting into Tier 1 universities, our students having meaningful career plans, our students being able to pursue skilled trades, our students being able to enlist in the military, you can go on and on and on, depends on them getting good guidance counseling. So thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for listening to the board, and Dr. Jara for implementing the plan. I also want to compliment Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Jara. I have not had a single complaint about high school scheduling for the last year and a half. So what a dramatic difference that made. Thank you for getting the schedules out early. It sounds like a small thing to a lot of folks, but if you're a parent of a child and you're not getting your kids' classes finalized till you're 2-3 weeks into the school year, it's a major thing, especially in this day of rigor that we have in our classrooms. So thank you for that. I also want to commend our administration. We just came back, a number of us from the Council of Great City Schools. And one of the things that I found a little bit frustrating this time is so much of what they were talking about in the counseling arena, or the mental health arena, or the bowling arena. After about my third workshop, I was like, well, I'm not getting anything out of this because we're already doing all this stuff. So it was really gratifying to go up there and hear that initiatives that other urban districts are just getting started on. Mrs. Gordon was mentioning this to me. We're ahead of the curve, and we've been ahead of the curve. And again, that's thanks to the taxpayers. And the last comment I want to make is, I do want to say, though, and I don't want to end on a negative note, but I think it has to be said that, and we cannot control this because it is a categorical in terms of funding, but there are recommended ratios of mental health counselors for every 1,000 students in this country, and also of psychologists for every 1,000 students in this country. And the state of Florida ranks in the bottom quartile. In fact, I believe they rank in about the bottom 15 states in the country. So I just don't know how many more tragedies it's going to take, but eventually our policymakers need to wake up that we just need more funding for more mental health counselors. And we're doing what we can. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for that, and Dr. Jara. Having 2 per area is a great start, but it's nowhere near where we need to be if we really want to prevent those tragedies that we've seen in other districts from occurring here. So thank you. All right, we do have 2 speakers. First one is, and I want to make sure, Ms. Remus, was it on this topic you wanted to talk about? It just says strategic plan. Okay, well, come on up then. Welcome. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for coming. Our first speaker is Ms. Susan Remus. And Ms. Remus, forgive me if you have, but I don't recognize you. Go ahead and go up to the podium. I'll talk as you're walking, speaking before us. But our procedure is you should start with your name and your address for the record. And then you will have 3 minutes to address the board on this topic. And there's a clock up there so you can watch yourself. And I'm not super hard line on the time, but try to keep it within 3 minutes. If you need a little bit more, that's okay, but close to 3 minutes. We're all yours.
Hi, my name's Susan Remus. My address is 523 West Jackson Street, apartment 215, Orlando, Florida 32805. I just wanted to make a comment on the child abuse and the counselors and everything that is in place, and that I'm not sure what you were talking about the lower percentages in the country. But there is an issue that is I can hardly talk about it. There is an issue that is not known, it's unknown, and it is ignored. And many people that I tell about this, they look right past my head. But has anybody heard of parental alienation? And parental alienation syndrome is what children will get with symptoms that say that something is very wrong. And one parent will take the children and they will abuse the children in this way by taking them away from a parent. And I have to say that this started for myself in 2008. And it wasn't until about maybe 2 years later that I finally discovered what this was. And I've been an advocate for this for, these 6 years. And about 3 years ago, I started approaching this, and the mayor signed a proclamation as Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And I haven't seen anything. That was 3 years. The last 2 years, I couldn't even take it because it's so harsh. But I have been doing many studies, and I've been meeting with Mr. Rodriguez, and I've got some other people that I have lined up as far as psychological counseling. So this is something on the agenda I want to bring up because it is bullying between families, and what we'd like to do is know that people, the teachers on up, can spot it in an instant. That's how keen I want our schools to be, our parents, and our community. But it is left out, and it's bullying to another parent. Before my time is up, I want to read to you something. Now, this is called custodial interference. Now, I didn't even have any problems. There was no papers for 3 years filed. And my divorce was finished on March 4th of this year. So not until then. And it says, in most states, it's a crime for one parent to take a child from the other with the intent to interfere with that parent's physical custody of the child. This crime is commonly referred to as custodial interference. The police will become involved to get the child returned and arrest the parent who took the child. In most states, the parent deprived of custody may also sue the other person for money damages. I want to say I think it's more of a psychological process than it is with the courts. But if we could comment on this, then we could keep it out of the courts. And I don't see my daughter, haven't hugged her in about 4.5 years. So I'd like for us to put that on the agenda someday. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Remus. I know that must have been difficult. Thank you for talking to us. All right, our next speaker is Diana Moore. Ms. Moore? Know you well, but name and address.
Diana Moore, 1020 Webster Avenue, speaking on behalf of CTA. I wanted to share the psychologist and social worker ratio in Orange County because I have a report in front of me that was sent to me 2 days ago. And since we're on mental health, it does really relate. The recommended School Social Worker Association of America recommends 1 social worker per 400 students. No Child Left Behind recommends 1 per 800 students. Orange County's ratio is 1 for every 7,342 students. I have it broken down. I'll send this information to you by your learning communities, and the learning community with the best ratio is West Learning Community, 1 per 6,283 students. And so I wanted to speak up on behalf of the social workers in Orange County, because there's also a comparison here for Miami, who handles 345,000 students. They have 104 social workers. Orange County has 190,000, and they have 48 social workers. So I hope you will look into that, because when we asked about the guidance counselors getting the extra time, you've increased it. So I'm hoping that you will keep that in mind for our social workers. The ideal would be 1 per 400. I know we won't get there, but maybe some type of a 5-year tier plan would be great. Thank you very much.
Ms. Moore, can I have a question? Answer a question?
Psychologist, yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Can you give us the number in Dade and the number in Orange again? 48, and what was the number in Dade?
For 345,000 students, 104 social workers, 54 specific site social workers. Broward has 260,000 with 90 social workers. Hillsborough, 200,000 students with 169 social workers. Orange was 183 at the time of this report with 48. Pinellas, 104 with 104,000 students, 103 social workers, and Duval has 125,000 students, and it looks like they break theirs up into very specific attendance social workers, full service, teen parent program, and homeless, and so they have specifics. So I'll send it to you by email.
All right, thank you, Ms. Moore. Mr. Roach, did you want to, who over there? Okay. No, I appreciate the numbers, and that's what I was alluding to, the ratios. And by the way, the reason I asked her to repeat those, other than Pinellas, if I was doing my math there pretty correctly and quickly, our ratios are pretty much in line with the other urban districts. The problem is the state of Florida as a whole. If you were to look at all our school districts, you would find the ratios are pretty, and I have, because I've given speeches on this, the ratios across the board for Florida districts are abysmally low compared to the rest of the country. And not to point fingers, but it is a state categorical and a dedicated funding source that we really have very little control over. So they need to be higher, she's right. But they need to be higher as an entire state, not for OCPS in particular. Ms. Gordon.
Right, thank you. I think I was on for another comment, but I'll save it. But thank you. I believe, I go back to when you were in the legislation up in Tallahassee, let me put it that way. That was a major thing here. And Bob Graham, when he was governor, we did the elementary counselors, and we were able to get that throughout the state. I think Ms. Moore should remember that. I know Mr. Roach remembers it. I was one of those counselors that went throughout the state and the nation, and Governor Bob Graham initiative was able to get counselors in every school. We were able to do that. And how the numbers became to get so low, the funding was cut. And I always bring up Miss Harriet, Harriet Murhill was over guidance at the time in Orange County. And the counselors lobbied, and your own Dr. Kathy Pope at that particular time was with us as we went back and forth to Tallahassee, lobbying you as a legislator to look at that. And we were able to get more counselors. And I think you remember I brought back all of the counselors one day before the board, to the board, so that people could see how many counselors we actually had during that time, and it was in the 80s. And they started in the 70s with the program called Bridge, and that's how they got the elementary counselors, and then it went on in to the 13 original elementary counselors, and then everybody went back for certification. The state helped to provide that, and the University of Central Florida, which was Florida Tech at that time, provided it. You all provided money, but when the funds were cut, then the ratio went down. When you begin to look at the ratio for all of these special areas, Dr. Jenkins was a principal at that particular time. She will let you know The psychologists were involved in that, and then you had to begin to look at the art, the music, the PE. So then it had to get to where there was a priority. And then, as I stated to you when Mr. Roach chaired in the position that you're in, other than countywide, but elected by the board to serve, then that's when we were trying to restore, to get librarians back, to get counselors back, because once that funding was cut, that funding was never really restored. So that's where we are. Our numbers were extremely high because I was one of those counselors, and Dr. Pope was one of those counselors at the particular time that went high. We never really reached the 500 and all that. So that was something else. So I did want to make that comment. You're going to always have the shortage until money is placed. So you'll have to take from Peter to pay Paul, okay? And that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be shuffling PE teachers around, and Lord forbid if the millage doesn't pass, you're going to shuffle more than PE teachers around. So, and we're hoping, and it looks good because we're all out there fighting and knocking on doors and everything like that. But that's what it all ended up being. And then it came to this board that they had to make a decision of what they were going to let the leader of this board do, which was over operations. And that's when the leader of the board decided that he would allow the principals to make their lead on who would remain, who can help get the school to the top. And then so some of these positions were cut again. So that's what it was, and all of it is a budget matter. There's never enough money in the pot. There used to be, and you could see the millage flyer that we are sending out to everybody. It shows where we were way over that 7,000. It was a very comfortable spot to be in per pupil ratio. So I just wanted to make that point, and you all did an excellent job in providing those auxiliaries for those schools that needed this type of counseling, because it was needed at the time. I also wanted to ask you, Mr. Chairman, if you would ask our general counsel, Mr. Rodriguez, if he would speak to the parental alienation, because I've heard it, and I know a little bit about, I think Ms. Moore and I raised our hand, and a couple other board members, but that one I'm a little bit familiar with, but I don't know where we are. I know the grandparents, it was another issue with the grandparents having rights and not being able to see their grandchildren, which if it wasn't for the grandparents, there would be no grandchildren. Okay, there would be no children. Okay, so that was another one. But I would like for you to address the parental alienation for us so that we would know a little bit about it, because this is the first that I've really heard about it.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Ms. Gordon, members of the board, I've had probably at least 3 or 4 conversations with Ms. Remus on this topic. I know I've talked to Ms. Cartwright in the past about what to do, what are the next steps that we can possibly do. Parental alienation syndrome, I will say that I don't know if it's widely identified as a syndrome or as a condition, but I think the general premise is that one parent uses a child to keep them away from the other parent, particularly in issues of messy separations or divorces. So where one parent is instructing the child not to basically turn their back on the other parent. Parent is instructing their child to turn their back on the other parent. My wife, as a family law judge, has seen this in her courtroom. She's also working with me to try and identify potentially a psychiatrist, psychologist, some type of expert, and that's been one of the issues we've been sort of working through, because despite the testimony from Ms. Remus, and I'm sure there's other parents out there that have probably experienced something similar, depending on the extreme of it, there are some potential mental health impacts, not only to our students, but obviously to the parents involved as well. Helping our counselors, our guidance folks, et cetera, identify what are the symptoms, that is Ms. Remus's primary goal. And I know that she is really seeking to make sure that, it doesn't happen to other children in the district based on her experiences.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman, for that, and thank you, General Counsel. That brings me to a concern because this, the mental impact, the bottom line is the child and the student, and it is a mental impact just like anything else that and she's right about the bullying, because as a former counsel, well, I'm still a counsel, but as a licensed counselor in the state of Florida, the mental impact to that child, this is why the child could be having the learning problems within the schools and the mental problem. So what is it that we could do as a school system, because it does affect that child? I remember when we went to the organization, and there was a syndrome, and it never was brought out as one, but those students that had parents that remained in jail and are still in jail today. So what Orange County Public School did, we got together and we would take those children over to 33rd Street and they would visit their parents in jail in a counseling situation. We did that for quite some time. And First Baptist even came in as a partner and helped us, and to some extent they're still continuing that a little bit. So I would like to see us look into that, because when you have something like that going on, and that's why we have our mental counselors, I would like to see to this board and Mr. Chairman, because that is a mental impact. We don't know how many students in our district may be affected by this. Do we have any idea of how many, or do we have any way of finding out how many may be affected by this now?
I think that's one of the difficulties, Ms. Gordon, is being able to quantify, because I think if you think about it, in a traditional divorce, not every child that is going through a divorce is going to be subjected to this kind of alienation or treatment by one parent. I think the biggest thing I think that we can do as a district is probably to make sure that our teachers, they wear many hats, we know that, but one of those is that social worker hat, where they recognize where a child in their classroom is exhibiting perhaps behavior, mannerisms, or odd behavior that perhaps is consistent with trouble at home. And when those issues arise, then obviously they need to be referred to the right specialists and experts that can give them some counseling.
Well, I'd like to go further than that. As a teacher and a counselor, I'd like to see the Parent Academy gets involved with these parents that may bring this to we cannot allow the classroom teacher to do everything. If you put anything else on us, my hair is going to turn back to black. Okay, and then Pam Gould is going to be great. All right. So no, I think that Dr. Jenkins, I would like to make a recommendation to this board that we maybe open an avenue up with maybe your wife might be a liaison for us, and she deals in that, or we get with the Chief Justice of the Ninth Judicial Court for Osceola and Orange, because I know what we're dealing with in Osceola, and it is exactly that. There are parent alienation after you explained it, because this is what the kids sit down and tell us. But is there any way, Dr. Jenkins, that this, not to put extra burden on the Parent Academy, but I think this might be a point, because as we attend those parent academies, those parents are speaking to us. They are letting us know what's happening, if it's good, if it's bad, if it's something that they need help with. So if we could get with the Judicial Court, the Ninth Judicial Court, and see if they have counselors too that they can loan us, to let's see if we just can't ask the classroom teacher to continue to do it. They're going to be doing it anyhow, but they're not the expert there. That parent would be the one to let us know. And once that parent tell us, then we, through that Parent Academy and the parent council at that school, can look out for that child. So, Dr. Jenkins, if you could address that for me to see if that could fit in there, I would be very grateful.
Careful, Dr. Jenkins, because Mr. Rodriguez just volunteered his wife. Your husband's next.
He did.
Actually, I'm also volunteering the general counsel's wife.
You're going to be a popular man when you go home tonight.
She will
Mr.
not be
Rodriguez.
available to speak on these issues. She can certainly volunteer to identify some mental health experts, whether they're psychologists, psychiatrists, and that's what I think, as a resource. It's not a legal issue. It's really more of a mental health issue, which I think if it's at the pleasure of the board, we can certainly line up a speaker or two to give you some more information on that information.
And then not only that, but also with the courts, they can also legally give the parents the help that they need. It might be an extension there that they could also get the help that they need. All right, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Gordon. All right, let's go ahead and move into our regular agenda. We do not have board members, any newly appointed administrators tonight to recognize. Let me make a preliminary announcement. I usually make this at this point. If I known we would have speakers, I would have made it earlier. But any individual who would like to address an item on our consent or non-consent agenda may do so by completing a yellow form that looks like this that you can get up here at the board table from Ms. McGill from Board Services, the lady at the far left-hand side of the board table. I will call you to speak when that agenda item comes up, and by now everybody in the audience understands the routine. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board and on the issue of concern to you. So before we go into our public hearing, Dr. Jenkins, let's cover the agenda. Do we have any changes to our agenda this evening?
We do, Mr. Chairman. There are 2 changes. First of all, item 1401 is being withdrawn. That was a settlement for workers' comp that will be brought back at a later time. And secondly, we have added an emergency item, item 1601, that is a request for approval of the real estate purchase agreement for property. Okay. Are there any questions on the proposed changes? Seeing none, I see cause to amend the agenda as suggested. Can I have a motion to do so? It's been moved by Ms. Flynn. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Gould. Is there any debate or discussion of that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the agenda as proposed signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Show the agenda adopted. All right, we are now in agenda item 3.01, which is approval or seeking approval of the rezoning for new school 41E SE-2. Dr. Jenkins. Thank you, members of the board. As you are well aware, but for the sake of the public, I want to remind you this was already covered in rule development with extensive conversation and certainly with additional feedback from members of the communities involved. We will ask Ms. Carol McGowan to present the information.
Thank you and good evening. Let me introduce another member of the pupil assignment staff, Renata Paropche, will be here to support me. This is step 10 of our rezoning process, the public hearing. 41E SE2 is a new elementary school which will be located in the southeast part of Orange County. And if I hit the button, we are going to review our timeline. We had 2 community meetings in September. We had our rural development workshop on September 16th, and then tonight's our public hearing. We have not received any additional input from our public since September 16th. If we look at our map, let me orient the audience to what we have. The red lines are our current school zone lines, and the different shades represent what the proposed new school's boundaries would be. The area shaded in yellow would be the new school, 41E SE2. The area in green would be Moss Park, the new zone. The area in pink would be the new Sunblaze zone, and blue would be North Lake Park. In each of the text boxes, you can see that we have the name of the school, the permanent program capacity, which is the number of students that will reside within the brick and mortar building, the current students that reside in that shaded area, and the projected enrollment for 2015. It is a range. On our data table, we have provided additional information to orient us to this table. Our first column is the name of the school and the permanent program capacity. So our first one is Moss Park. And then our second column is the...
Dr. McGowan, can
Yes,
you
sir.
pause one moment?
I'd be happy to, sir.
Normally, we just follow this stuff along, but I don't like that. Is there anybody from IT that you can't see any of that from the audience, Dr. Jenkins? Let's do this.
Dylan.
It's a rezoning, so I feel like it should be able to be visible from the audience and on TV as well. So I hate to delay us any longer, but let's just all stay in our seats and pause for a couple minutes, see if they can fix that.
I have one here. Oh, mine's not. Can we use the... Okay. It's on two sides. It's not going to show right. Try this one. Not in color. There's the data table. Try that one. I don't think that's any better.
Well, I think I only have one speaker on the topic, but we're just going to go and go forward. Then I hate to
I
not
think this is a little better.
a little bit better. I just
Okay.
Definitely better than the original.
yeah.
And okay.
It'll be.
It is on the website.
It's on the website.
It has been there.
Good point, Ms. Gold.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Jenkins.
And also, I'm told by staff that they'll be able to make it clean on the television version. We just can't get it how we want it on the screen up here, but on the television version, it'll be clean as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll just keep going forward, Dr. McGowan. Thank
All
you.
right. Sorry. Again, the first column is the name of the school and the permanent program capacity. Our second column is the enrollment as of September 2nd for this year. That's our first number. The second set of numbers is the percent of white, black, and other. And our third line is the percent of non-Hispanic and Hispanic. And we have that for each of our schools. The third column is the number of students who are residing in the current school zone. Our fourth column is the proposed school zone numbers, and it also includes the racial demographics and ethnicity within each of the proposed zones and the range anticipated for opening. Our next column is our free and reduced meals. The C stands for the current percent at the school this year, at the time this picture was taken, and the proposed is what the new school percentage should look like when it opens. C is current, P is proposed. Our next two columns is the number of students that are percent of students that score level 1 and 2 on FCAT math, the first column, and the next one is reading. Again, C is current, P is proposed. The next column is our English language learners, our percent at current and proposed. And the last column is the percent of students who are in the exceptional education program. If we look at this again, the projected enrollment for 2015 for Moss Park is from 950 to 990. Sunblaze, 910 to 950. North Lake Park, 850 to 890. And for 41E SE2, 800 to 840. Dr. Jenkins, we've received no other input from September, and we conclude our presentation. It's weird.
Thank you, Ms. McGowan. I would also remind board members, just so we're clear, that is property 41. It is in the east, it is an elementary school in a southeast learning community, which is District 2. If you recall, the lettering and numbering is to prevent prematurely calling schools by an actual destination, such as a road or a community, because we can never recover from it once we start calling it a particular name. And so that is property 41 in the east, an elementary school in the southeast learning community, which is District 2. We are certainly open to any additional questions, Mr. Chairman.
That was a very polite way of saying, Mr. Chair, stop calling it what you always call it. All right, we have one speaker. Before we go to our one speaker, Ms. Flynn, since it's your district, do you want to say anything before I go to our one speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had quite a bit of discussion during the rule development, as was stated by the superintendent. One of the things I did want to remind the board and ask the superintendent for more of a timeline is in regard to a targeted rezoning that we mentioned in part of the suggested Sunblaze zone. We really looked at some of the demographics and the numbers and thought it was a fair request by some of the parents to look at an area that entered off of Narcoossee to look at the possibility of moving that section, and I think it was about 75 students to the new school. So I just wanted to bring that up. That's the only thing that I wanted to ask about is I would request that we do it before the end of the school year.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely. Once this process is completed, then we will go through the official process to do that targeted rezoning as recommended as well.
Okay, thank you. And then after hearing the speaker, I'll make a motion.
All right. We do have one speaker this evening, Ms. Shannon McLaughlin. Ms. McLaughlin, welcome back. And if you could, Ms. McLaughlin, let me ask you to start with your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Sublett. My name is Shannon McLaughlin. My address is 10204 Kristen Park Drive, Orlando 32832. The families from Sunblaze Elementary asked that one of our representatives speak so that the record will reflect our support of option 1, and that since the board plans to support another option, we strongly request and support the targeted rezoning of the areas near the communities titled the Retreat. We request that this targeted rezoning divide that area so that the negative impact of Sunblaze is not too detrimental to our school. Our families will continue to follow the school board's actions to be sure that the board actively and aggressively pursues this targeted rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. All right, I don't have any other speakers. Ms. Flynn, let me flip it back to you, and then I'm going to go to Mrs. Gordon after that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. I appreciate your comments. This is a high-growth area, and with that, so many of us have experienced what it means to live in a high, rapid growth area. There's going to be many years before these schools level out. So part of the characteristics in these areas is that schools will be most likely overcrowded. And so all of these schools have to shoulder the consequence of that high growth. So I just want to say that I realize the angst that comes with that, but it is a task of ours to make sure that not just one school bears the brunt and that all of them can shoulder it to a workable degree. And the targeted rezoning, we will look at that and study it just like we do all the other rezonings. It's not a given that it will occur, but we certainly will do that with fidelity. And so with those remarks, Mr. Chair, I do move that the board approves the superintendent's staff recommendation for the 41E SE2 rezoning as shown on the map that we have.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Flynn to approve the proposed rezoning and seconded by Vice Chair Gordon. Is there any further debate or discussion on the motion? Everybody understand the motion? All right, seeing no further debate, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Show the motion adopted unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for shepherding us through that, Ms. Flynn. Ms. McLaughlin, thank you and your fellow parents for your professionalism and working with the board on this issue. Thank you. All right, thank you, Dr. McGowan, for you and your staff's hard work. All right, we are now on the consent agenda. We do have one contested matter on the consent agenda. Consistent with our practice, I am going to pull that item off and move it to 1602. 1602, if nobody objects to that, so we can go ahead and pass the consent agenda and let other folks get out of here. We're sticking around with that. So that's in the matter of an employee, JT. So we'll move that off, and that will just take about 5 minutes, Mr. Thomas or Ms. Thomas. All right, we are now on the consent agenda. Are there any questions or discussion of the consent agenda? Can I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda? No. What agenda item is it? Where's it on the consent agenda, Ms. Moore? I don't. Okay. Well, you can fill that out after you're done. Go ahead and make your comments now if you could. And Diane, I don't mean to be a mother hen, but this is
Webster
about the
Avenue.
master in-service plan. This is about the master in-service plan.
And it does
and
relate to
implementation.
bargaining because now we're trying to tie our evaluations to professional development. I'd just like to ask that it go through bargaining.
No, don't do
All right, well, let's go ahead and state your name and address for the record and then make your
Diana
comment.
Moore, representing CTA 1020 Webster Avenue. There are a lot of things that are in this document that really relate to the evaluation system and our teachers, and I would like to ask that we review it through the bargaining process, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Okay, but that.
All right, thank you, Diane. Okay. All right.
I move the approval of.
All right, Ms. Vice Chair Gordon has moved approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a second to do that? It's been seconded by Mrs. Robinson. Or is there any debate or discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Show the consent agenda adopted.
All right.
And the people all stood and said, amen, we can go home. Congratulations, Picton.
Amen, Cody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Thank you, Nancy.
Boys, you did good. You hung in there longer than most scouts do, so congratulations.
They did well.
It's a school night. Go home and get some sleep, guys.
Yeah, they look at
Ethan actually lives about 4 doors from me,
Oh, really?
and Brogan was a middle linebacker on my football team. His dad and I coached, and a darn good one, too. And they both play lacrosse with my son now. All right, guys, have a good night. See you, Keith.
Go knock on.
All right, we are now on, let's take up 16.02. 601 first, which is approval of the real estate purchase agreement. Who's going to be handling this, Dr. Jenkins?
Mr. Chairman, as promised, we have the final property for our Paramore K-8 in this resolution. We are delighted that it has been concluded. Commendations certainly to Mr. Morris and his staff and legal support for those documents being completed. Those documents are before us for approval tonight.
All right. Is there any further questions or comments from the board? This has been a long, winding road to get to this point, Dr. Jenkins. I'm thinking maybe this was the last piece. And so thank you for your hard work on this. And Mrs. Gordon, thank you for your leadership on this initiative.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really thank this board and the superintendent staff. They have really been working behind the scenes, Mr. Morris and Mr. Jenkins. He never gets any accolades, but tonight he gets a shout out.
All right.
But thank you so very much. I think the community is excited. So now Dr. Carol and her staff can get busy so we can have some parents. All right. Thank you.
Amen. All right. Can I entertain a motion to approve the real estate purchase agreement at item 1601? It's been moved by Vice.
It will be my honor to move the purchase of the real estate. And my colleague on your right.
And seconded by the entire board.
Thank you.
Is there any further debate or discussion of that motion?
Thank you.
Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Show the motion
Nancy.
adopted. Fist bump.
Yeah. Oh.
All right. Okay. All right. Report by superintendent, singular. Dr. Jenkins.
To my right is the prestigious Broad Award, which we will be taking out. We wanted to make sure it was here for a camera shot, but we will certainly be taking it out to SeaWorld for our teachers and staff to have an opportunity to see it as well. It is quite heavy, commissioned statue. We are extremely proud of that. We will see you at SeaWorld tomorrow afternoon along with our teachers for a big celebration.
Well, we're all looking forward to that, and kudos again to the district. We'll celebrate tomorrow. I forgot to ask during pre-agenda. We got tied up with speakers there. Are there any committee reports? Budget, I'm assuming no. Communications, Ms. Moore?
I just wanted to report that I had a wonderful interview session, and thank you for allowing me to represent the board with Mr. Collins and Ms. Lauren Rowe with the Orlando Sentinel. And I think by now most of you have seen the lovely endorsement that we received by the Orlando Sentinel. So we're really grateful for that. I think 4 years ago we were happy they just didn't say no, and here we are 4 years later, and I think it was a tribute to this board, the staff, the teachers, and the students that they recognized the significance of the community supporting the school district in terms of all the children passing tests and completing tests, AP exams, graduation rates, and all the rest, that in their mind there was a link between what the community does, and that really is a confirmation of our strategic plan that we cannot do it without the support of our parents and our community. So that was the main thing I wanted to report back to you, and I know that Lauren Rowe has been a tremendous blessing. They're very, very intrigued by why this very prominent mother would step forward to speak so highly of the school district. They asked her very cautiously about why she even chose to go to Orange County Public Schools, and she was really happy to talk about how wonderful her child's teacher was and what this school district has meant to her entire family. So I enjoyed being there with her. We said something about property values, and she chimed right in with a personal experience of having just sold her house and how she really did believe that because the school was in a very good school district that helped her in that sale. And so it was really gratifying to read that article, hearing about the return on investment. I never thought we would get such a poetic and supportive editorial out of the Sentinel. So that was a lot of work in the last couple of weeks, and we've got a lot more on our plate, and hopefully we'll have another good week coming forward. And thanks to all of you for all your help.
Ms. Moore, thank you for your leadership. That was a glowing editorial, and you handled that on our behalf. Thank you. Along with, who went with you, Mr. Collins and Ms. Rowe. Thank you, Mr. Collins, for covering that for us. And really, thank you for all your leadership on this initiative. And we're looking good, knock on wood, and hopefully we'll be celebrating next Tuesday night. And we will be bringing down board members. I've neglected to mention this, and it's going to be shortly after the reorganization meeting. We'll bring in Lauren, Dick Batchelor, our co-chairs of the sales tax campaign. I think we need to do a special recognition at a board meeting to recognize our community leaders who helped us get it passed, both those initiatives. Hopefully both those initiatives passed. I don't want to jinx us. I got Mr. Roach first. Mr. Roach, is it on this topic or is it on a different topic?
No, just closeout comment.
Okay, we'll come back to you then. Mrs. Cadle?
I would like to suggest that we nominate the two of them for Citizen of the Year from the Sentinel. They are asking for nominations at this time. And so I think, that even if the Sentinel doesn't choose them, the fact that two people stood up for public education, win, lose, or draw on the one mill, that we hope will be successful. But to step out there and say public education is important in this community, I think they are worthy of being nominated by us as Citizens of the Year. I don't know, I was flipping through the paper and saw it there. So I would say as soon as we get through with SeaWorld, I'll start writing a little bit of it, and then I'll submit it through the superintendent. But I'll start working on it.
Great idea. Maybe we can look to Dylan and the superintendent to help us with that. And I'll also, we should all chime in with the board. Dr. Jenkins?
Chairman, I apologize. I was trying to use few words because I feel my voice slipping. But I do want to say not just teachers and principals celebrating, but that statue to my right is actually a celebration of this entire community and how they have supported our children and our schools in times when we could have gone through severe budget cuts or could have had dilapidated buildings. This community has stepped up. So I want to reiterate, as we've said previously, that the Broad Prize, that beautiful statue, is actually a tribute to our entire community. The work is led by our wonderful teachers in the classroom and our principals in our schools.
Amen. Great point. Thank you. All right. Do we have a legislative committee report?
Just that I'm going to call for a committee meeting soon in November, and I may wait till after the reorg. But also, please get in your comments to Joseph Morgan in regard to comments that you would like to see or suggestions for the testing and accountability resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Flynn. All right. Community Action Board, Mrs. Gordon?
We did it last
Did it last time? Okay. All right. I'm going to go to Mr. Roach, and then, it's not that late yet, and you all don't have to do this, but if you'd like.
We're leaving.
Oh, it is okay. Okay. Well, anyway, now you're going to be very frustrated with me. I'd asked the board members who went to Council of Great City Schools to be thinking about it if you wanted to make any comments about things you brought back to share for greater good. So I think that would be productive. If you have to leave and don't want to sit through that, that's fine. You're not offending me or anybody else. So I have some too I wanted to point out. So Mr. Roach, let me start with you, then I'll go to Ms. Gould and Ms. Flynn.
I just had a comment I wanted to make to Dr. Jenkins, if I may. And Dr. Jenkins and I hung out together Monday night, and I wanted to tell you, Barbara, what occurred to me the next day as I kind of debriefed that with myself. I did a debriefing by myself, but it reminded me of two events I wanted to share with you really quickly. It stood out to me with leaders that led me. One of them was as a ROTC cadet in college. We had in my junior year, we went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, and we practiced being infantrymen and went through the hills of Pennsylvania on different drills. And I recall one of the worst nights of my entire life, I do believe, was a rainy night in Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, on a mountain with my co-soldier and we had to dig in overnight. So we dug a foxhole, and one of us slept while the other one stood guard. It was a drill, pretty much. It was dark, and it rained, and we're on a hill. And so all we needed to do was dig a trench on the top of our foxhole so that when the water came, it went around. And of course, it didn't work a lot. We actually slept in a big mud hole. But it was a miserable night, and we had to go through the drill. But I'll never forget, before the sun came up, I heard someone coming through the night, and it was a tall man in his poncho and his helmet, and he had another fellow with him. I guess the sergeant was with him. This was the colonel of the whole unit, came over and was serving hot coffee to all of us in those foxholes. Now, that was the worst coffee I've ever had in my entire life. It didn't matter, though. It was hot, and it was black. But I never forgot about him coming out. Didn't have to. He had a nice tent somewhere, and he was dry, but he came out in that poncho just as wet as we were and served coffee to us. And I guess on another occasion, at Boone High School, just an incredibly busy counseling office over there, about 7 or 8 of us. I recall it being just so hectic. And in through the door in the middle of the day walks the principal of the school, happened to be Dan Buckman, in a chef outfit with a full apron and a hat, pushing a cart with juice and coffee and pastries for the counselors and the staff in there. And I'm only telling you that because I think I saw you in a different light last night. I saw you with 19 or 20 teachers right in the middle of them, and wonderful facilitator. I don't know that I've ever seen that skill come out of you. You were really fair with everything, but you were one of the staff last night. You were one of the team, and I can't tell you how much I know that they appreciated that. Because I know that it didn't hit me till later how significant that was. Because I think you're the kind of person, Barbara, where you've won a lot of awards, a lot of accolades, and you've been, and that's wonderful. And I think all of us are very proud of you. But in a way that it creates a little bit of an untouchable kind of a leader. New York and wherever you go, you seem to get these awards, and it's a wonderful thing. But I think when you came down to the troops, the frontline troops, and made that connection, that makes you even a more important figure. And before I depart on this board, I wanted to tell you that I think it's just really important, teacher morale-wise, to know that their leader is in the trenches with them, bringing hot coffee, horrible coffee. But you're there with them, rainy and sweaty, just like they are. And I think that's why a lot of teachers, I don't think they do it to aggravate us. I think they ask us to come into their classrooms because they're begging for people to just touch base with them, get in the trenches with them, if you will. That's what they really want to do. So I think that's what you did last night. I wanted to just compliment you sincerely for that episode.
Ms. Gould.
I almost hate to follow that. We've been talking a lot about testing, and this is just something, it ties to the Great City Schools because it was actually something I thought about when we were listening to the head of the College Board, David, thank you. It's such an easy name. David Coleman, and we were talking about the testing, and he was even talking about how he is inspired to revamp a lot of testing and fight on behalf of kids and parents and teachers to make the test so that we are really reflecting the success of our students, which was wonderful to hear. But while I was sitting there and he was talking about all different things, one of the things that came to mind was Disney. And Universal does this, and we did it some in the hospital industry, but Disney continually does it, where they cross-utilize their staffs during intense times to do things. And in the case of the holidays, my husband goes from, his little cozy office to slinging hash at one of the parks to serve the customer. And there's two reasons that they do that. One is they really understand where the rubber meets the road. They understand the customer experience. They get right out there, as you you were talking about, Mr. Roach, to the trenches. But the other thing is it becomes the support during high volume times. And I was wondering if we could look at a way to create proctors from our back of house to come to the front of house and proctor tests instead of moving teachers and counselors and librarians and things around. And I would be willing to do that if I'm qualified. I don't know what qualification I have to proctor, but to be able to really provide that kind of support and maybe think outside the box and give support while we're working through all this minutia of the testing.
Dr. Jenkins?
Certainly, Ms. Gould, members of the board, absolutely. We have a practice of our instructional staff actually going out and helping to proctor in our schools. We've not used the non-instructional side of the house. That might be something to consider if we could put them through an initial training. Let me tell you, the only reason why I would probably hesitate on board members is should there ever be anything that comes up as being inappropriate, you would have to be a witness. You would need to be a witness in such a case where you are supposed to be more of the judge in that instance. So I would probably hesitate on board members, but the practice we've had is on the instructional side. We can certainly look at using some of our non-instructional, and I've asked Dr. Kent also to look into Kelly Services to be available. It will come with a cost, but I've asked them to get that figure for us as well.
Ms. Flynn.
Thank you. I have three quick things. The first is, when we were listening to the student in pre-agenda, Mrs. Gordon, your help with the sort of test prep, stress release program, I thought was excellent. And I think if we can provide more resources to students that help them with that test anxiety, because we want them to be successful. So thank you for bringing that up, and maybe make those services just be a little bit more accessible. The second thing is, this past weekend we had a partnership with UCF at their homecoming game, whereby OCPS, anybody who went through the OCPS promo code was able to purchase a ticket for $16, and every ticket had $2 come back to OCPS to benefit our homeless student department services. So I wanted to thank Sarah Awe from Community Relations, who really, did the legwork and putting the specifics together. But we sold under the OCPS promo code 563 tickets were purchased, so that's $1,126 that will go to OCPS homeless.
Wow.
Yes. That's great. And Dr. Jenkins was in the president's box, so she was up there. And we were all jealous, but we got to go down on the sidelines. The other thing is up in. We had fun down on the we got to go, we got Sarah and through her contact, a few of us got to go down on the sidelines, and people said, oh, great, what did you do there? We just went down there. That was it. You just stood there, and then you left 10 minutes later. But it was a different perspective. At the Council of Great City Schools, I sat in on a session that was so pertinent to what we were discussing last week, I think, in regard to our grading system. And Des Moines, Iowa, their public schools has undertaken a total revamp of their testing. I have handouts from their website. I forgot the ones that I actually received, but they call it Standards Referenced Grading. Here's another one. And they took a whole year to study this with a task force, and they had a timeline for implementation, for a phased implementation. But after you read it, it'll show that it's standards reference grading. I mean, this is a big change. Refers to instructional approaches that are aligned to learning standards. And then they don't grade homework. Homework's important, but they should not be graded. These are behaviors, not learning targets. Students should be held accountable for these things, and their progress is reported on the DMPS citizenship and employability skills rubric. Why do we not include homework in the body of evidence? We only want to include evidence that we know was completed independently by the student. So just a different take on a completely different grading system using the 4-point scale. Grades are still given, but if we if we are looking to do something that's this monumental, I really appreciated their approach to it with a task force and an implementation. They started with partial implementation in middle schools and then in high school from 9th grade. Then it followed the student on through. So I thought it was very interesting and wanted to give this a sort of just a little bit of background as to how another district implemented it.
Thank you. Ms. Cadle.
I don't have any handouts.
Okay.
But I was trying, I went with my mini to take notes. One of the things, Portland refers to their English language learners as emerging bilinguals. And I thought that was a very interesting way to talk about the fact they're learning a second language. So, you know, as you talk about branding, because we hear so much about we want our children to be bilingual, and, you know, here we have a group that when they learn English, they are bilingual. And then we had the opportunity to hear the president of the National Girl Scouts. And I walked away from there going, Paramore K-8, all of the statistics she was talking about for success, Boy Scouts. I think as we're looking at it, we probably need to build that component in, some sort of component in for the children. And then I've seen the ad here locally, but I also saw it in Milwaukee. The Khan Academy is partnering with Bank of America for financial literacy. And that is, you know, I saw it in Milwaukee first, but I've seen it here in town too. And then, you know, we talk about how big the urban districts are in Florida. And one of the statistics that came out, the students that are served by the Council of Great City Schools, 7.1 million children in the state of Florida, in the United States, are represented by the Council of Great City School Districts. Then, you know me, I'm always looking at social media because I'm so bad at it. And I went to Fort Worth Independent School District. And if you'll remember last year, Fort Worth had horrible weather, and they had just gotten their new app. And so their app became the place to get the weather updates for the community. So it didn't go to the news media first. It didn't go out on phone calls first. It went to the app. And that is where their app uses just increased hugely. They also do a Webby Award monthly. And schools are encouraged to update their homepage or their local school page. And then there's a competition monthly for the most up-to-date site and the ones that are following the rules of engagement for the district. You know, so like you can't change the template, but you've got to have the up-to-date information. Then they said, of course, the kids are changing all the time. And so they're now moved to Vine and Instagram as well. People like me are still learning Facebook. And they have contests with the students. So they have something they want the students to talk about. And so they have contests and ask the kids to submit videos. And then on Throwback Thursdays, they put old photos of their school district on Throwback Thursday posts. And then on Wednesdays, they play a game, Where Are We? So you could take a picture of a building, you could take a picture of the back of the stadium, you could take a picture of a parking lot, you know. You could do one of our new retention ponds somewhere, but where are we? And it's kind of a contest to guess where we are in Orange County Public Schools on that day. Then, and I'm not quite sure how this one works, but they encourage their parents to take pictures of their children on the first day of school and post them. And they also encourage teachers to submit pictures of them preparing their classrooms for schools, for the opening of schools. So like if you're going to be in Miss Smith's class and she's getting everything ready, you could see Miss Smith's class. Of course, when I left there, I went, okay, we probably need someone who does nothing but social media because this could be all-encompassing. And I don't know that we could do it, but I just thought it was interesting because we're always talking about what's going on. And so I just thought those were some interesting things. They did not have anyone. Everyone had to do it. It was all hands on deck for it. Fort Worth. And then I kind of took a different path this year when I went to the council because we had so many presentations going on. And I have to tell you, I was so proud of all of the presentations. I missed one, but I did get to see the superintendent and Dr. Jara and Mr. Thomas present on the Broad Award. And then I did see an update on our digital that Mr. Eugene and Dr. Jara did. And then I saw the digital pilot that Curriculum did, and I saw the school transformation office. And, I left going, we never see the day-to-day implementation of what's going on because we just tell the superintendent we want this to be done, and she does it. And I thought, it'd be really interesting for us to see what's going on because I walked away from there going, we're really doing good stuff. And in every session I was at, people wanted to know more of what we were doing. And sometimes I think we undersell what we're doing. And I know that a lot of times we've come back from other conferences and saying, we already did that. And this time, I came back from the council going, we're doing a lot of what people are thinking about doing or just starting it. We've been doing it for a while. So I would encourage us to maybe even think about if staff could present to us. I know we're all really, really busy, but if there was one time that we probably had 2.5 hours that we could just see what they presented because it was good stuff. And I was really proud to be a member of this board. I was really proud to be part of the Orange County Public Schools family. And there was something I heard, and I forget what it was. And I was like, well, if we did that, like maybe if we hosted the Council of Great City Schools here, then you'd have to have all our staff out there because how many blue shirts did we walk by? I mean, it seems like it was all hands on deck. And I was like, ooh, we'd have to pretty much shut down. We wouldn't be teaching children that day. So, I was kind of conflicted with it because I was like, I don't want all hands on deck away and the kids just there for 4 days while we're busy showing everybody what we're doing. So anyway, I thought it was a good conference with OCPS looking really, really good.
Well, I'm glad we did this. Great comments. Finding out what everybody learned. And I agree. I think we should put in a bid to host it. I think we have a lot to show and be proud of. Were you going to say something else?
Well, I just heard Pam say City Year. It was so cool when we went in on Wednesday night for the reception. There was City Year on both sides cheering us in. And so it was cool because we've all seen that here at our schools. And there they were at the Art Museum in Milwaukee walking us in.
All right. Well, I punched my button. Let me take care of business first. I've handed out the work session schedule. We'll see if everybody back Thursday. We'll have dinner for you. It's going to be a long one on Thursday, so buckle in. we're doing our school improvement plans on Thursday. So I do expect that to go for 3.5, 4, 5 hours, okay, because we have a lot of schools to get through. Council for Great City Schools, I heard a lot of great things there. I handed out an article, and I know that reading time's at a premium for you all, so if you can't read it, I understand. But it's about a program that actually Debbie Pedraza has gone and visited along with a team from Orange County Public Schools. It's out in Houston, Unified School District. It's called Emerge, and it's a program where it's a coordinated effort to identify and help low-income, high-achieving students gain acceptance into Tier 1 universities. Tier 1 universities are those type universities that we recognize with our Super Scholars program. Let me just throw out a couple stats that are in that article why I'm so happy that we're doing the Super Scholars program and why I'd like to see us go further and do something like this Emerge program. Research shows that for every high-achieving, low-income student who applies to a Tier 1 college, for every one high-achieving, low-income student who applies to a Tier 1 college, 15 similar high-achieving, high-income students apply. So I had to read that like 4 times before it really sunk in. So you take 2 kids with equivalent academic credentials, equivalent test scores, equivalent grade point averages. For every one poor student who applies to a Tier 1 college, 15 higher income students apply to a Tier 1 college. And when they go in and when they look at that data and we interview those students, why they're not applying, it's everything from fear of leaving home, and this is all reflected in the article. It's a belief that they can't afford it. It's a belief that those schools are only for rich kids. All kinds of reasons. Yet, I also highlighted there high poverty students who are high achieving that go to a Tier 1 college, 73% of them will get a 4-year degree within 8 years of graduation, as opposed to a much smaller proportion, dramatically smaller, who go to a 2 or 4-year college that's not a Tier 1 school. So they started this program. They had headed up a high poverty English language learner who ended up going to Yale. He was the first in his family to graduate from college. He started the program. They go out and they try to identify students with potential. They try to guide them through the process. They took them up to the New England states to take them on a tour of schools. They provide them the special supports. You should know another stat that I highlighted in there of the Tier 1 schools. 61 colleges and universities in the United States say they will meet 100% of a student's demonstrated financial need. And what they're trying to get these kids to understand is to open their eyes and let them realize, as we're trying to do with Super Scholars, that, hey, you can get into these schools and you can go into these schools. And one of the things that I heard that was so persuasive to me at the conference was the Yale graduate, and I'm blanking out on his name, it's here in the article, Rick Ortiz, who heads up this program. And he articulated it far more eloquently than I can. But he says, we really do believe, and the superintendent of Houston Independent Schools said this as well, that this will transform Houston, because a large number of those students from high poverty families are going to come back home after going to a Tier 1 college. And you cannot minimize the effect of having kids from MIT, Caltech, Chicago, Rice, you name your university, back in your community, who come out of the projects, who come out of the urban neighborhoods, who come from high poverty environments. So, Debbie, I can't wait to hear from you on this. I know that the superintendent would not have sent a team out to Houston to look at this if we weren't looking at it. I really hope we pursue it, because I think it's very, very exciting what they're doing out there. I also heard, and this wasn't the same school district, one of the districts, it may have been Oakland, it may have been Houston, I'm not sure which one, or another one in the same presentation. They have a program, and they're a large urban district like us. You know how all our 4th graders go to the symphony or go see the Philharmonic or go see opera or whatever? They take every single 4th grader, it's a 4th grade field trip in their district, to tour a college, a local college. So that's their 4th grade field trip, every student in 4th grade. So for us, the equivalent would be every 4th grader going on a tour of UCF and walking through. And I thought, that's brilliant, because these kids, a lot of them will never set foot on the grounds of a university or a college. And we have one right here in our backyard. They've started in some of their high schools, and this isn't all Houston. These are different districts. Some called Go Centers. Now we have something similar with the Winter Park, and that model is growing with what Winter Park has done with their College and Career Planning Center. But their Go Centers are staffed by volunteer former college admission officers for kids who want to go to college, and they're staffed by, and I can tell you, I'm embarrassed to admit this in this room especially, my wife and I both have college degrees, and y'all have been through this. You've been through it, but I'm just now navigating this with a junior. And, and I'm realizing, wow, this has changed a lot from when I was a kid, My wife went to register her child for the ACT last night. I thought, how long can this take? 20 minutes? An hour and a half into it, and the questionnaire and all. So I know I'm preaching to the choir with y'all.
You got to download.
But one other thing, and I'm shifting gears here. Another thing that some of these large urban districts are now doing, in the way that we're having every child take the PSAT, they are now going towards, and Houston is one of them, requiring every 11th grader to take the SAT, and they pay for the cost of the SAT. Wow. Some of the districts are up to 70% SAT preparation, SAT participation, excuse me. So I love that as well, because, again, there can be kids there falling through the cracks who don't realize they could have the test scores to go to these schools. Shifting gears entirely, it's the last thing I have to say, is, and this has nothing to do with encouraging higher poverty, disadvantaged kids to go to Tier 1 schools, but one of the districts has also set up professional development center, and I have a feeling we're probably steaming towards this anyway, where entire grade teams can go voluntarily. They're not required to go. They have to ask to go, but they can get in-service time. They get paid to take their entire fourth grade team from XYZ Elementary or ABC Junior High to go to a professional development center for all-day professional development. They're there on their own volition. They're on their own free will. I thought, that's a great idea for us to look at as well. Last thing I said, and I'm going to maybe communicate with the executive director of the Council for Great City Schools. And I hope I don't ruin any of the goodwill, because what I'm about to say, y'all may not agree with. The one thing that's bothering me the last 2 trips to Council of Great City Schools, and it's the only downside I see to it, really, because I get a lot of good out of there. But it seemed to me this trip in particular, when I look through, and we had probably, I'm conservatively guessing, a good 60 workshops to choose from, because there were 3 blocks per day, and each one had 10 to 15, and they weren't just repeats. I mean, a lot of them were new. In fact, I missed a couple I wanted to go to because I thought it would be like FSBA and it would be repeated, and I messed up. But probably 95% of them are focused on high poverty, inner city children and their needs. And, that's great, but, a lot of y'all have heard me preach that I think 2 things, and these are just philosophies of mine, that whether it's fair or not, the reputation of an urban district is measured by how its higher poverty inner city schools do, because that's people don't tend to talk about Winter Park from outside this area. They don't tend to talk about Timber Creek. They tend to talk about some of our schools with more challenging populations. So I think that's important, but I also personally think it's important, a point I'm going to make to their executive director, that to have a successful urban school district, you've got to have the kind of school district we still have here in Orange County. The kind of school district where you send your children to the public school, I send my children to the public school, you send your children. In other words, where parents, regardless of their race, who have the means to send their children to other options, still choose to send their children to the public schools. And that's not true of every urban district. I know urban districts in Florida where it's just sort of anathema that if you come from any money at all, you don't send your kids to public school. You send them to private school. And the strength of our district has been we've kept the middle class in our schools. So I wish Council of Great City Schools, I'm saying this at the board table because we have some leaders here at the board table. I wish Dr. Jenkins was still here. I wish they would have a few more work sessions on what we've talked a lot about for the last 3 years, is how do you compete? How do you compete to keep socioeconomic diversity in your schools? Because I think that's so important to all our schools to have that socioeconomic diversity. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening to it.
My guess is all
Ms.
you
Cable.
have to do is submit to, to the council that, this is something that you think would be worthwhile conversation, and maybe Dr. Jara and Dr. Jenkins and some of their team will know some places that are doing really well and make a suggestion that, if we could have some kind of track that talked about that. Because the other thing I noticed this time, and Dr. Jara and I kind of laughed about it, having vendors at conferences is now the reality of having conferences because they are so expensive. But it seemed like, and I think I even had the conversation with Mr. Eugene, it seemed like every time we turned a corner, there was a vendor looking for us. There were a lot of vendors there. Well, see, and I thought when you were going to say that, I thought you were going to say there were a lot of vendors there. But, it's having looked at the numbers for the state organization, it's the reality of doing what you have to do for a conference. You have to get some sponsors in there. And so, that was one of the things that I noticed that was really different this time in the times that I've been there before. There just seemed to be more.
All right, Ms. Flynn.
I think Orange County, though, is unique in Florida because of the way our districts are configured, because so many of the other districts that are a member of that council are municipal. There's, so they've been drawn differently than ours. The College Board director. Yes, David Coleman. I can't remember his name either. But one of the announcements that he made is that when students apply to take the SAT, they're going to include, these are students who demonstrate a need, will include, was it 3 or 4 vouchers to apply to colleges? That's right. Yeah. So that's why you went to SAT. Like a $25 voucher. Yeah, because applying to these colleges isn't cheap, and so that's going to be another way that they feel they're going to help children go to college.
All right, Ms. Gould, bring us in for a landing.
One of the other things, and I know, Joey, and you were going to be talking to the Council of Great City Schools, that I would have a suggestion is going back to the competitiveness, there was not really anything on career and technical training, which kind of shocked me because that is a national conversation. That's not a Florida conversation that's happening. And it was really completely absent from the conference, not only college bound, but those that aren't college bound, which is the majority of these school districts that were represented there are not college bound. So that was one thing. The other thing is I found a couple of the classes or sessions were valuable, but they were so driven to the operational side that I had to really think and pull out the nuggets that were from the governance side. So I would love to see a coding system. I have this Association of Fundraising Professionals does a really good job of this, where they'll kind of code, your top tier development people, finance people, operational people, and often courses are appropriate for all, but those that are really operationally driven, or you kind of know where you're getting into, you go into, because I was popping in and out of a couple because it was so operationally driven. I felt like I was missing something else in a nugget that I might be able to use a little bit more aptly at the table. So that may be another just kind of hint for them, is to kind of code it up in a way for board members, senior leadership, and mid-level leadership.
I'm laughing because that's so funny here. I had the same experience. I had a couple where I needed Dr. Wright and Dr. Vasquez in there to interpret for me, because honestly, I was like, okay, this is purely, and that's a downside of having a group that's both superintendents and school board members. I stumbled into some of the wrong sessions where I was like, okay, I don't even know what you're talking about. Even the alphabet soup of acronyms lost me about 20 minutes ago.
But they have
one was on response to intervention, which I know the basics of, but they were really deep in the weeds. And anyway.
I went to not the session we did on talent, but another session where they were talking about the evaluation process for both principals and the teachers. The first 10 minutes were great. After that, it was like, okay.
Well, and they have the very best app. Of all the apps that we've tried, they have the best app because you can load it into your calendar and you can just follow it and know where you need to be. So they've got that down pat.
All right. Oh, Ms. Moore. Sorry.
I was okay. I haven't said anything about the conference. I do think that we were unique, and I so actually appreciated hearing from our staff and the presentations. We almost often have a day where all the staff comes and presents to us before they go, because I actually picked up a few things by comparing, especially in the technology piece, when we were in there with Miami-Dade and Houston, and it was just great to watch them sharing cards and realizing that these top 3 districts in the country were actually going to be collaborating best practices, and how exciting could that be. But I also came home with what you said. There weren't some sessions that I was surprised about, and I just was happy that we come from a state with countywide school districts, because unfortunately some of these big cities have the problems they do because their population, their areas are divided up in way too many small school districts, and they have huge inequities in funding. And I sat on the plane with a family. I made the mistake of having the mom and child here and the dad and child here and stuff going in front of me the whole plane trip. But anyway, they were from Milwaukee, and I told them what I was doing and coming to them. Oh, we don't go to Milwaukee Public School and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, we don't really have that problem so much here. The way they're split up in that community, what the impact is on the entire culture. We're blessed in Florida. So I wish they would have some governance conversations about the type of district makeup that aids your academic achievement and the success of your community. Because when you look at a Houston and you look at Miami-Dade, there's some things that we have in common. We're all in one big, large school district for the entire city, and I think that makes a difference. And finally, David Coleman was the most aspirational, to me personally, the most aspirational speaker. I did not, did not realize at the time that he was the author, the big one who began Common Core, and to hear the challenges that he has gone through, but yet the vision and how he sees the world. You had such confidence in his intentions and what he desired for our children, and yet he's gone through so much, with how Common Core has been attacked all over the country. So to hear where he's going and the vision he had in spite of all of that controversy, like with the SAT and having the vouchers for every child, they're realizing that he wants every child to have a chance at success, and that Common Core is one of the ways to do that. And the impact he's had on education, it's going to be difficult for me when I start hearing all the chatter anti-Common Core, and after hearing David Coleman myself, you just can't be more supportive of the concept. So I was happy to get to attend with you. It's a blessing to learn everything, but on the other hand, it was always nice to come home.
Well, yeah, I will say I was struck incredibly, and this will make no sense to anybody who wasn't there, but a number of our staffers in the room were there. The disconnect between what's going on right now with the anti-testing crowd and what's going on in education nationally is just gaping. I mean, we spent 3 days up there, and if you were there, every presentation was about increasing rigor, increasing accountability, increasing measurement, how to measure it. And I found that very frustrating because, we're hearing at the local level in this state, I think we're a little bit unique, maybe not, but I'm not articulating it very well. The disconnect there is incredible. And it's the same disconnect between what's going on here and what's going on in Tallahassee and what's going on in Washington. I mean, that ship has sailed, and folks don't understand that ship has sailed, and it's just picking up steam. It's not slowing down. Folks think it's going to slow down. It's picking up steam, and it's accelerating. And it's accelerating by national policymakers accelerating it. And that's a harsh message, but it is what it is. So anyway, well, thank you. And everybody, thank you for weighing in with what you learned. That was great comments. So with that, anything else? All right, we're adjourned.
A baby is born. Cute. He's already surrounded by technology. By age 4, she knows how to use a smartphone. He's reading. No, not from this. This. She's making a digital presentation. You don't even know what that is. He has an interest. No, not that. That. By middle school, she has built her own website and her first app. In high school,
with my Michelson interferometer, I can measure down to the fraction of the wavelength of light.
wow. The world is changing. And they are preparing for jobs that don't even exist yet.